The stars stretched across the black sea of space like silver dust, scattered in patterns that no human had ever fully mapped. Daniel Ward sat inside the viewing deck of the diplomatic ship Horizon, staring at them with a strange feeling in his chest. He had signed up for this mission as an engineer, not as a politician. Yet fate had placed him on the first human delegation to meet the Zarathi Dominion, a powerful alien empire that stretched across hundreds of worlds. Daniel was not a soldier, not a commander, not even a trained diplomat. He was just a man who knew machines better than people, a mechanic who had spent half his life fixing engines and reactors. But somehow, he had been chosen to join the group. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was because he had survived 3 accidents on a mining station and kept working as if nothing had happened. Or maybe, Daniel thought, it was because humans were strange to the rest of the galaxy, and the diplomats wanted a face that looked ordinary. The horizon dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and a giant world filled the view screen. Zarath Prime. It was covered with glowing cities, oceans of blue-green water, and strange mountain ranges that twisted like claws. Around it, massive space stations hung like jewels, guarded by fleets of silver warships. Even the most experienced, human envoys were silent when they saw it. "This is it," one of them whispered. "The heart of the Zarathi Dominion." Daniel felt a knot in his stomach. Stories about the Zarathi had traveled across the stars long before humans met them. They were tall, scaled beings, fierce in war and cunning in politics. Their queen ruled with absolute authority, her word law across all her worlds. Some said she was cruel, others said she was wise, but everyone agreed on one thing: she was powerful, and no one defied her. The horizon was guided down to the surface. The landing site was a palace made of black stone that shimmered in the light. Towers rose into the clouds, and banners of red and silver snapped in the wind. The human delegation, dressed in formal uniforms, walked down the ramp, greeted by Zarathi soldiers who stood taller than any human, their golden armor gleaming. Daniel kept his head down, walking behind the envoys, trying to look invisible. They were led into the great hall of the palace. It was vast, so large that the ceiling seemed to vanish into mist. Along the walls, nobles of the Zarathi watched, their eyes glowing faintly. At the far end of the hall sat the queen herself, Queen Ziara. She rose from her throne, and Daniel felt the air grow heavy. She was taller than any human, her skin a deep shade of violet with faint silver patterns that shimmered like stars. Her crown was not metal but living crystal, pulsing with light. Her eyes, sharp and burning, swept across the humans. When she spoke, her voice echoed as though the palace itself repeated her words. "You are the new people from the edge of the galaxy," she said. "I welcome you to my world." The diplomats bowed. Daniel followed their lead, though clumsily. He felt her gaze sweep across the group, and to his surprise it lingered on him. A strange shiver ran down his spine. The envoy spoke, offering words of peace and trade. The queen listened, expression unreadable. Daniel stayed silent, trying to stay still. But fate has its own path. During the ceremony, a loud crack split the air. One of the great chandeliers hanging from the misty ceiling came loose. It plummeted down toward the floor, and a Zarathi child standing at the edge of the court froze in terror. The envoys gasped, but no one moved fast enough. Daniel didn't think. He just ran. His body moved before his mind did. He threw himself forward, grabbed the child, and shoved them clear just as the chandelier crashed to the floor, shattering into a storm of crystal shards. The hall went silent. Everyone stared. Daniel was on the floor, holding the frightened child, shards of crystal scattered around him. He looked up, panting, and realized that every single eye, human and alien alike, was fixed on him. The queen stepped down from her throne. The nobles murmured. She walked toward Daniel slowly, each step echoing. When she reached him, she looked down at the child, then at him. Her burning eyes locked onto his, and for a moment he felt like prey caught in the gaze of a predator. "You risked yourself to save one of my blood," she said. Daniel swallowed hard. It was instinct. The queen tilted her head. Among my people, such an act is not instinct, it is declaration. You have placed yourself between danger and the bloodline of the throne. That is an ancient gesture, a binding one. Daniel blinked. I don't understand. The queen turned to the nobles. Her voice rang out. This human has made a vow before the court. By our laws, he has claimed me as his bond. And I, Zayara of Zerath, accept. The hall exploded with noise. Nobles shouted, some in shock, others in disbelief. The human envoys panicked, whispering to each other in confusion. Daniel felt his heart stop. What? He said. No, wait, I didn't. The queen raised a hand, silencing the hall. Her eyes glowed brighter. Human Daniel Ward, you are mine. You will stand at my side, not as guest, not as envoy, but as consort. From this day you belong to me. The words hit him like a hammer. His crew's faces turned pale. One of the diplomats tried to protest but was silenced by Zerathi guards. Daniel felt the world spinning. Consort? Belong? Property? What had he just stumbled into? Before he could speak again, the queen reached out and touched his shoulder with a clawed hand. It was not gentle, but it was not cruel either. It was final. The court bowed in unison, the sound like thunder. Daniel realized with growing dread that he had just been claimed by the most powerful ruler in the galaxy, not as a guest, not as an equal, but as her husband. Later, when the envoys were dismissed, Daniel found himself alone in a chamber of black stone, guarded by soldiers who would not let him leave. He paced, his thoughts racing. He had come here to fix machines, not to become property of an alien queen. His friends could not help him. His words meant nothing, and every action he had taken since landing had been twisted into meaning he did not intend. And yet, a small part of him could not shake the image of her eyes when she looked at him. Not just as a ruler claiming power, but as someone who saw something she wanted, something she would not release. Daniel sat down, his hands trembling. The galaxy had just changed for him in a way he could never have imagined, and he did not yet know if it was the beginning of his doom or the start of something that would reshape empires. Daniel did not sleep that night. The chamber he had been given was larger than any room he had ever stayed in, its walls carved from black stone and lined with glowing silver veins that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. Strange tapestries hung from the ceiling, showing battles and rulers from long ago. Servants had placed food on a golden table, fruit that glowed faintly, meat cut into shining slices, drinks that smoked in crystal cups. But Daniel had no appetite. He paced the floor, running his hands through his hair, trying to understand what had just happened. He had come here as part of a delegation, a mechanic hidden among diplomats. He had not planned to speak, not planned to stand out, not planned to do anything more than make sure the ship ran properly. But one moment of instinct, saving a child, had turned into something impossible. The queen of the Zerathi Dominion had claimed him as her consort, declaring to her entire court that he belonged to her. Daniel sat on the edge of the massive bed, burying his face in his hands. "What have I done?" he whispered. When morning came, the guards outside the door shifted and the chamber doors opened with a groan. A tall figure stepped in, a Zerathi dressed in deep red robes with scales polished to a shine. His eyes glowed faint gold and his face was stern. "You will follow," the man said. Daniel frowned. "Where?" "To the queen. She summons you." Daniel hesitated but knew he had no choice. He followed the robed man through endless halls of stone, past towering guards and silent nobles who stared at him with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Whispers followed him like shadows. He could not understand all of their words, but he caught enough to know they called him the human consort, the queen's property, and even the outsider mistake. At last they entered another vast chamber, smaller than the throne hall but still immense. The queen sat at a long table, golden plates before her. She wore a robe of dark silver, her crown glowing faintly. When she saw Daniel, she gestured for him to approach. "Sit," she commanded. Daniel sat stiffly, his hands on his knees. The robed man bowed and withdrew, leaving the two of them alone with only silent guards at the edges of the room. The queen studied him for a long time. "You did not eat last night." Daniel blinked. "I wasn't hungry." Her sharp eyes narrowed. "Among my people, refusing food offered in the royal chamber is insult." "I didn't mean to insult anyone," Daniel said quickly. I wasn't sure if it was even safe for me to eat." For the first time, her lips curved slightly. Not a smile, but close. "You think we would poison you after binding you to me?" "Strange creature." Daniel leaned forward. "About that, there's been a mistake. Where I come from, saving someone from danger doesn't mean marriage." The queen's eyes burned brighter. "You dare say my law is mistake?" No, Daniel said, lifting his hands. "I just mean, it's not what I intended." She leaned back, tilting her head. "Intention matters little. Deeds speak louder. You stood between my blood and death. You claimed me before all. To undo that would be dishonor greater than war. My court would see it as weakness, my enemies would use it, and I do not allow weakness." Daniel swallowed. "So I have no choice?" "You have choice," she said slowly. "You can remain here at my side, honored and guarded, or you can refuse, and your people will pay the price." The words hit him like ice. He realized the truth. He was not just trapped for himself. Humanity was at risk. If he offended her, if he made her look weak, the Dominion might declare war on Earth before humanity was ready to fight. He lowered his head. "Then I guess I'm staying." The queen's eyes softened slightly. "You learn quickly." Over the next days, Daniel's life became a strange rhythm. He was dressed in fine clothes woven from shimmering fabric that felt both soft and heavy. Servants followed him everywhere, adjusting his attire, carrying trays of food and bowing every time he moved. Guards trailed him, never allowing him to step outside without permission. It was a golden cage, beautiful but suffocating. He was presented to the court again, this time formally at the queen's side. Nobles stared at him as if he were a wild animal on display. Some sneered openly. Others whispered in tones of envy. A few seemed intrigued, their eyes following him with curiosity. Through it all, Queen Ziyara remained calm and commanding. She introduced him as her consort, her chosen, the one bound by ancient vow. She spoke as if it were absolute, daring anyone to challenge her. None did, not openly. But Daniel could feel the tension in the air. Not everyone was pleased by this union. At night, he returned to his chamber, alone. The queen did not share her private rooms with him. He wondered if that was mercy or insult, perhaps both. He sat by the window, looking at the strange stars of this world, wondering if his friends on the horizon were still here, or if they had already been sent back to Earth. He wondered if he would ever see home again. Days turned into weeks. Daniel began learning about the Zarathi people, partly from overhearing conversations, partly from servants who spoke more freely when they thought he was not listening. He learned that the queen ruled with absolute power, but her throne was not unchallenged. Factions of nobles waited for any sign of weakness. Rivals in distant star systems whispered of rebellion. Even here, in the palace, there were those who would smile to her face and plot behind her back. Daniel also began to notice how different their culture was. To the Zarathi, claiming someone as property was not seen as cruelty. It was seen as protection, a bond that ensured safety and honor. For them, the word mine meant not only possession, but also responsibility. He was still uncomfortable with it, but he began to understand that what seemed wrong to him was sacred to them. One evening he was summoned again to dine with the queen. She sat across from him, her eyes sharp as always. But tonight there was less distance in her tone. "You are restless," she said. Daniel sighed. "Wouldn't you be? I'm not used to being locked away." Her eyes narrowed. "Locked away? You walk the palace freely. You are dressed in honor, guarded as treasure. Do you not see privilege?" "It feels like a cage," Daniel said quietly. For a long moment she studied him. Then surprisingly, she laughed. It was not loud, but it was real. You are strange. Others beg for place at my side. You call it cage. I didn't ask for it, Daniel replied. She leaned forward. And yet here you are, tell me, human. What would you do if you had freedom? Daniel thought for a moment. I'd work. Fix things. That's what I do. Machines, engines, systems. That's where I feel useful. The queen tilted her head. You are no warrior, no noble, yet you value usefulness. Interesting. She sat back, her eyes gleaming. Perhaps you will prove more than ornament after all. That night, Daniel could not sleep. Her words echoed in his head. More than ornament. Did that mean she was beginning to see him as something else? Or was it just another game of power? But deep down he realized something had shifted. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was part of her world now, caught in her web. And if he was to survive, he could not remain passive. He would have to find a way to turn this strange bond into something that gave him strength. He did not know it yet, but forces in the palace were already moving against him. Nobles whispered that the human consort was dangerous, that he might change the queen, that he might upset the balance of power. And in the shadows of the black stone halls, enemies began to sharpen their knives. Daniel stared at the alien stars outside his window, unaware that his greatest test was yet to come. Daniel's days inside the palace grew longer. At first, everything had been overwhelming. Bright halls filled with alien nobles, strange customs he did not understand, and guards who followed him everywhere. But as time passed, the shock faded. He began to notice the details others overlooked. He saw how the palace ran, how the servants carried out endless tasks, how soldiers patrolled certain areas more heavily than others, and how the nobles whispered in corners when they thought no one was watching. He also noticed how much of the palace machinery seemed to be failing. Doors that once slid open smoothly now groaned on their tracks. Light crystals flickered in dark corners. Even the heating vents in the halls gave strange rattling noises at times. To Zarathi eyes, these flaws were invisible. They were so used to grandeur that they ignored the small cracks forming in their empire's walls. But Daniel had been a mechanic most of his life. To him, problems stood out like flashing alarms. One morning, as he walked through the grand courtyard, with his guards, Daniel saw a group of Zarathi engineers struggling with a large generator that powered part of the palace. Sparks shot out of the machine as they argued in their language, pressing glowing panels and muttering in frustration. Without thinking, Daniel stepped closer. You're overloading the main converter, he said. The engineers turned to him, startled. One of them hissed, This is no place for the consort. Daniel ignored the insult and crouched by the machine. He pointed to the coolant lines. See? That? You've got a pressure block. It's backing up and burning out the system. If you flush it and reroute the secondary lines, it'll run smooth again. The Zarathi engineers stared. One laughed harshly. Human toys and human tricks. To not... But before he could finish, Daniel grabbed a tool from the ground. His guards moved forward as if to stop him, but Daniel waved them off. In minutes, his hands moved with the ease of long practice. He adjusted the lines, twisted the valves, and cleared the blockage. The generator hummed, steady and smooth. The Siet engineers froze. The sparks vanished. The system glowed bright and stable. There, Daniel said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Simple. The engineers exchanged uneasy glances. They had been fighting with that generator for days. The human consort had fixed it in minutes. Word spread quickly through the palace. Servants whispered. Guards exchanged looks, and even nobles caught wind of the story. The queen's property had repaired a system her own engineers could. That evening, Queen Ziara summoned him again. She sat on her throne, her crystal crown gleaming faintly. Her eyes burned brighter than usual as she studied him. I hear you touched the generator, she said. Daniel shifted nervously. It was broken. I fixed it. Without permission. I didn't think about permission, Daniel admitted. I just couldn't watch them do it wrong. For a long moment, the queen was silent. Then, unexpectedly, she leaned back and let out a soft sound that almost seemed like laughter. Strange human, you are supposed to be treasure kept safe. Yet you act as if you are worker in the dust. Daniel met her gaze. That's what I am. I'm not a treasure. I'm a mechanic. If something's broken, I fix it. That's who I am. Her eyes narrowed, glowing brighter. And if what is broken is not machine but empire? Daniel hesitated. Then you still fix it, or it falls apart. The queen stared at him for a long time, then dismissed him with a wave. Daniel left, but her words stayed in his mind. In the days that followed, Daniel began to act differently. He no longer walked with his head down, pretending to be invisible. Instead, he watched more closely, asked questions, and even spoke to servants and guards. At first they were startled, even suspicious, but slowly they began to answer him. And slowly, he began to understand the cracks running through the dominion. The nobles were divided. Some feared the queen's growing power, others envied it, and more still wanted it for themselves. To them, Daniel was not just a curiosity, he was a threat. They whispered that he was changing the queen, making her look weak for keeping a human at her side. Some even claimed he had bewitched her. One night, Daniel discovered just how dangerous those whispers had become. He was returning to his chamber after walking in the gardens when a shadow moved. His guards were steps behind him, talking quietly, when suddenly a figure lunged from the darkness. A blade flashed, striking toward Daniel's chest. He twisted, stumbling back. The blade sliced his arm, burning hot, but missed his heart. The guards roared, surging forward, seizing the assassin. The attacker struggled, hissing curses before being thrown to the ground. Daniel clutched his arm, blood seeping through his clothes. His vision swam. He had never been so close to death before. The assassin was dragged before the queen within the hour. Daniel, arm wrapped in bandages, stood nearby as Queen Ziara rose from her throne, her eyes glowing like fire. "You dare strike at what is mine?" she thundered. The assassin spat. "You shame the Dominion by binding yourself to alien filth. He will ruin you. He will ruin us all." The queen's hand flicked, and the guards silenced the prisoner with brutal efficiency. But the words lingered in the air. Daniel saw the truth in the faces of the court. Many agreed with the assassin. That night in private, Daniel sat across from the queen. His arm still hurt, but it was not the wound that troubled him. It was the realization that his presence was tearing her court apart. "They hate me," said quietly. "They fear you," the queen corrected. Daniel shook his head. "No, they hate that you chose me. They hate that a human is here at all. And maybe they're right. I don't belong here." The queen's eyes narrowed. "Do not speak weakness." "It's not weakness," Daniel said firmly. "It's truth. Your empire is full of cracks. Enemies waiting for you to slip, and now I'm the excuse they're waiting for." The queen studied him, silent for a long time. At last, she leaned forward. "Then what would you do, human? You say machines must be fixed. You say empires are the same. So tell me, how do you fix this?" Daniel hesitated, then said, "You can't fix it by silencing people. You have to prove them wrong. You have to show them that keeping me here isn't weakness. It's strength." Her eyes burned brighter. "And how will you prove that?" Daniel took a deep breath. "Let me work. Let me fix things no one else can. Let me show them what a human can do, not as your ornament, not as your property, as your partner." The word hung in the air like a challenge. The queen's expression hardened, unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "You are bold. Too bold. But perhaps boldness is what I need." From that day, Daniel was no longer confined to the palace halls. Under heavy guard, he was allowed to move through the city, to observe, to touch the machines and systems that kept Zirath Prime alive. Everywhere he went, he found problems. Power plants running inefficiently, transport lines breaking down, factories wasting energy. And everywhere he went, he found solutions. At first, the Zirathi engineers resisted him. They laughed at his simple tools, his rough methods. But when his fixes worked, when systems hummed smoother and brighter than before, they stopped laughing. Soon, workers began to listen. Guards started to respect him. Even some nobles grudgingly admitted that the human had value. Rumors spread. Some called him dangerous, others called him clever. But everyone agreed on one thing. He was changing the palace, changing the city, and perhaps even changing the queen herself. For Queen Ziyara watched all of this closely. She saw how Daniel refused to bow to fear. She saw how he turned weakness into strength, how he faced enemies with stubborn defiance. And slowly, though she never said it aloud, she began to see him differently. One evening, after he had spent the day repairing a failing water system that supplied half the capital, she summoned him again. She stood by the great window of her private chamber, the alien stars glowing beyond. "You are not what I expected," she said. Daniel stood behind her, tired but firm. "Neither are you." She turned, her eyes locking with his. "You were supposed to be mine. Property. Yet you twist the meaning until I cannot tell if I own you or if you are claiming me instead." Daniel's heart pounded, but he did not look away. Maybe it's both. Maybe that's what partnership really is. For the first time, Queen Ziyara did not correct him, but outside her chamber, the whispers of rebellion grew louder. Nobles sharpened their plots. Enemies prepared their blades. The human consort had proven his worth, but in doing so, he had drawn more danger than ever before. And soon, Daniel would face the test of whether his ingenuity could save not just machines, but lives. The palace had always felt tense, but after Daniel began fixing its broken systems, the air grew heavier still. Guards stood taller at their posts, nobles whispered more sharply, and the servants bowed lower when he passed. He could feel the eyes on him everywhere he went, eyes filled with suspicion, jealousy, or fear. His success had made him valuable to the queen, but it had also painted a bright target on his back. At night, he often sat by his window, staring out at the alien city beyond. Towers of black stone rose into the sky, lit by glowing veins of silver, energy. Airships glided between them like dark fish swimming through light. It was beautiful, but Daniel could not forget the danger beneath the beauty. He had nearly been killed once. He knew it would not be the last attempt. One evening, the queen summoned him again. He found her in a chamber lined with maps of stars, her crystal crown glowing faintly in the dim light. She stood tall, her hands resting on a long staff that shimmered like frozen fire. When she turned to face him, her eyes burned with the weight of command. "Daniel Ward," she said, her voice steady. "The council presses against me. They say you are poison in my court. They say I am blinded by weakness." Daniel stepped closer. "And what do you say?" Her gaze sharpened. "I say you are strange. You defy my commands yet bring me strength. You speak of partnership, a word my people do not use. Yet you make me think of it. You unsettle me, human, and that is dangerous." Daniel did not flinch. Dangerous doesn't always mean bad. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then slowly, the queen's lips curved into something close to a smile. Perhaps. That night, a banquet was held in the great hall. Nobles from across the dominion gathered, dressed in robes of shimmering metal and jewels carved from living crystal. Long tables stretched beneath banners of silver and red. Food glowed on golden plates and music filled the air. Daniel sat at the queen's side, uncomfortable in the fine clothes the servants had wrapped him in. Every noble eye was on him, and every whisper seemed to cut at his skin. But the queen sat straight, her presence a wall of power, daring anyone to question her choice. The banquet seemed endless. Nobles toasted, musicians played, and speeches dragged on. Daniel tried to keep his head down, but he noticed something strange. Several servants moved too quickly, their hands trembling as they carried trays. One lingered too long near the queen's table, his eyes darting toward her cup. Daniel's instincts screamed. He had worked long enough in dangerous places to know when something was wrong. He leaned forward quickly. "Don't drink that," he whispered. The queen froze, her hand inches from the cup. Her glowing eyes locked onto his, sharp and questioning. Daniel reached out, knocking the cup aside. The liquid spilled onto the floor, sizzling as smoke rose from the stone. The hall fell silent. The queen rose instantly, her voice thundering. "Assassins!" Chaos erupted. Guards surged forward. The servant who carried the tray dropped it and tried to flee, but Daniel was faster. He grabbed a heavy plate and hurled it, striking the assassin in the back. The man stumbled, giving the guards time to seize him, but even as they dragged the traitor away, another shadow moved. From the far end of the hall, a noble drew a concealed blade and charged toward the queen. The guards were too far. The court, too stunned. Daniel did the only thing he could. He threw himself at her. The blade slashed across his side as he collided with the queen, knocking her off balance. Pain tore through his body, but he didn't let go. He shoved her back, away from the attacker, even as blood spilled down his clothes. The guards finally reached the noble, cutting him down before he could strike again. Silence fell. Daniel lay, on the ground, his vision swimming. The queen knelt beside him, her burning eyes wide with something he had never seen before. Fear. "You are wounded," she said, her voice low. Daniel forced a weak smile. "I'm getting used to it." The queen's hand pressed against the wound, her strength steady and sure. "Foolish human," she whispered. "Why do you throw yourself in front of death for me?" "Because," Daniel breathed, "if I'm your consort, then protecting you is my job. Isn't that what your law says?" For a long moment, she stared at him. Then slowly she nodded. But her eyes softened in a way Daniel had never seen. "Yes," she said, "and perhaps you are more than law." He lost consciousness soon after. When Daniel woke, he was in a healing chamber. Strange lights pulsed above him, and his side was wrapped in layers of glowing fabric. The air smelled sharp, like metal and herbs. He groaned, trying to sit up, but a strong hand pressed him down. "Stay," Queen Zayara said. She stood beside his bed, her crown dimmed, her face unguarded. For the first time, she looked less like a ruler and more like a person. "You should not have done that," she said quietly. Daniel managed a tired grin. "You're welcome." Her eyes narrowed, but not in anger. "Do you not value your life?" "I do," Daniel said. "But I value yours too." The queen was silent for a long time. Then she sat beside him, her gaze fixed on the glowing wall. "When I claimed you, I thought you were mine to command, mine to use. But you defy me at every step. You refuse to be only property. And now, you risk your life for me without thought. Tell me, human, what are you?" Daniel looked at her. His body hurt, but his voice was steady. "I'm someone who doesn't back down. Not from danger, not from people, not even from you." Her eyes met his glowing bright. For the first time, she did not look at him as property. She looked at him as equal. The days that followed were full of turmoil. The council raged at the banquet attack, demanding answers, demanding punishments. Some whispered that the queen had invited weakness into her court by keeping the human alive. Others argued that Daniel had saved her life, proving his worth. The court was divided more than ever before, but the queen silenced them all with one declaration. In the face of death, she said, her voice echoing through the great hall, "This human stood where others fled. He shielded me when my own noble struck at me. From this day forward, let it be known, Daniel Ward is not property. He is my husband, my partner, my equal." The hall erupted with gasps and shouts. Nobles shouted in protest, others in disbelief. But none could challenge her directly. Her word was law, and Daniel, standing beside her, felt the weight of the galaxy shift around him. That night, as they stood together on the palace balcony, looking out over the glowing city, the queen spoke softly. "You have changed me," she admitted. "You have changed how I see my throne, my people, and you." Daniel smiled faintly. "And you've changed me too. I didn't ask for this, but now that I'm here, I'm not going to run. She looked at him, her eyes softer than ever before. Then let us not run. Let us face what comes. Together. For the first time, Daniel believed her. But far beyond the palace walls, enemies were gathering. Nobles whispered of rebellion. Fleets in distant systems sharpened their weapons. The galaxy had taken notice of the strange bond between a queen and a human, and not all of them would let it stand. The storm was coming, and Daniel Ward, once just a mechanic, was now standing at the heart of it. The dawn broke over Zerath Prime like fire spilling across the sky. Towers of black stone caught the light, glowing faintly where veins of silver pulsed beneath the surface. The city hummed with life, but the air was heavy with tension. Word of the banquet assassination attempt and Daniel Ward's heroic actions had spread like wildfire. Some whispered admiration, others whispered fear. Many nobles who had once looked down on him now watched him closely, uncertain whether he was a threat or an asset. Daniel stood at the queen's side on the palace balcony overlooking the vast city below. He was no longer just the human consort, the queen's claimed property. The words she had spoken at the banquet echoed in his mind. He is my husband, my partner, my equal. They were more than ceremonial. They were truth now. Do you feel the weight of it? Queen Zera asked softly, her voice carrying across the balcony. Daniel glanced at her. Every day. But I've learned to carry it. She studied him, her eyes calm but sharp. The council will not rest until they remove you. They see you as a threat to their power. They will not hesitate to strike at both of us if they believe they can succeed. I know, Daniel said. And I know I can't do this alone. But neither can you. She nodded slowly. Then we faced them together. In the following days, preparations began. Daniel worked alongside the Zerathi engineers, studying the palace's defenses, the fleets stationed around the planet, and the transportation systems that connected cities. His human instincts, honed from years of fixing machines and improvising under pressure, allowed him to see weaknesses that others overlooked. The council, sensing their power slipping, began their rebellion in secret. Ships were readied, alliances were forged, and whispers of a coup filled the halls. They believed that if they struck at the palace while Daniel was present, they could not only remove the human from power, but also weaken the queen's rule across the Dominion. Daniel noticed signs of the conspiracy, messages intercepted by loyal servants, unusual ship movements in the spaceports, and unexplained absences of certain nobles. Each detail painted a picture of an impending attack. He shared his observations with Queen Zayara, who listened closely, her expression hardening. We cannot wait, she said. They strike soon and we must be ready. Daniel nodded. Then we plan. We use what we have. We turn their own overconfidence against them. The night before the expected attack, the palace was quiet but tense. Daniel moved through the halls, checking systems, reinforcing doors, and calibrating the palace defenses. He worked side by side with Zerathi engineers, soldiers, and even some nobles who had quietly pledged loyalty to the queen. His confidence grew as he realized that despite the language, culture, and alien machinery, human ingenuity was universal. As the first light of dawn reached the horizon, the enemy fleet appeared. Silver warships moved like a dark cloud across the sky, their weapons glinting in the sunlight. Daniel's heart pounded, but he did not falter. He had seen worse odds in mining accidents and space disasters. This was different, yes, but the principle was the same. Assess the problem, act fast, and do what must be done. Queen Zayara stood beside him on the balcony, her crystal crown catching the light. "Are you ready?" she asked. "I was born ready," Daniel said, and she allowed herself a small smile. The enemy fleet opened fire and the sky erupted in light and sound. Shields around the palace shimmered and flared under the assault. Soldiers rushed to stations and Daniel moved quickly among them, offering instructions, adjusting controls, and improvising solutions when panels failed or weapons misfired. His human experience with machines and quick thinking turned the tide in key moments. Explosions rocked the palace walls, but Daniel remained focused. He redirected energy to shields where it was needed most, rerouted power to weapon systems, and even helped coordinate the Queen's fleet in space. His presence became a force multiplier, turning a desperate defense into a coordinated counterattack. During the battle, Daniel spotted a squadron of ships breaking through the outer defenses, heading straight for the palace. Without hesitation, he commandeered a hovercraft and raced toward the landing platform. With precise timing, he launched countermeasures, intercepting the squadron before they could strike. One by one, enemy ships fell, their weapons disabled or destroyed by Daniel's improvised tactics. Inside the palace, the council's traitorous nobles attempted to breach the throne room. Daniel met them in the main corridor, flanked by loyal guards. He fought with calculated moves, disarming opponents and using his environment to his advantage. Each action was deliberate, combining human resourcefulness with the alien guards' strength and skill. Finally, the leader of the traitorous council attempted a direct strike on Queen Zayara. Daniel intercepted, throwing himself between the queen and the noble. With a swift move, he incapacitated the attacker, ending the threat to her life. The remaining rebels were captured or fled. The battle ended as suddenly as it had begun. The sky cleared, leaving smoke and debris in its wake. The palace, though damaged, still stood. The queen surveyed the scene, her eyes finding Daniel amidst the chaos. "You saved me," she said simply. Daniel, breathing hard, replied, "We saved each other." Word of the victory spread quickly. Across the Dominion, citizens and soldiers alike celebrated the defense of the palace. Daniel's actions became legendary. He had not only survived as a human in an alien court, but had turned a potential disaster into a triumph that strengthened the Queen's rule. In the weeks that followed, Queen Zayara made a historic declaration. She stood before the court with Daniel at her side and addressed the assembled nobles. "From this day forward," she said, her voice echoing through the hall, "Daniel Ward is no longer merely my consort. He is my husband, my partner, and my equal in all matters of the Dominion. Let it be known that any who challenge him challenge me, and any who challenge us challenge the strength of this empire itself." The hall erupted with noise, some in disbelief, others in awe, and many in reluctant respect. The words were more than ceremonial. They were a statement to the galaxy that the Dominion had a new kind of power, a human standing alongside its queen. Daniel, standing beside Zayara, felt the weight of history settle on his shoulders. He had come to Zareth Prime as a mechanic, a stranger in a foreign land. He had been claimed as property, declared consort, and faced enemies who sought his death. And now, he stood as a symbol of strength, partnership, and ingenuity, recognized not only by the Queen but by an entire empire. In the quiet moments that followed the ceremony, the Queen and Daniel walked together through the palace gardens. The sun was low, casting long shadows, and the air was filled with the scent of alien flowers that glowed faintly in the twilight. "You have changed everything," Zayara said softly. "And you changed me," Daniel replied. "I didn't expect any of this when I came here, nor did I," she admitted. "But we survived, we fought, and now we lead together." Daniel nodded. Together. For the first time, there was no doubt in his mind that he belonged here, not as property, not as a curiosity, but as a partner, a protector, and a symbol of what humans could accomplish even in the most alien of worlds. Beyond the palace walls, the galaxy watched. News of the human who had stood beside the Queen, who had fought, planned, and led in ways no Zarathi had expected, spread across star systems. Some envied, some feared, and some were inspired. Humanity, in the form of one brave mechanic, had made its mark in the stars, and the galaxy would never forget it. In the quiet of the night, Daniel and Queen Zayara stood on the balcony once more, looking at the glowing city below. Stars shone above them, endless and bright. Daniel placed his hand over hers. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together." "Yes," she agreed. Together. And so the story of the human who was claimed by an alien queen ended not in captivity, but in triumph. He had survived, adapted, and had shown that even in a world far beyond his own, human courage, ingenuity, and heart could shine brighter than the strongest alien empire. The galaxy had seen a new kind of power that day, not weapons alone, not fleets alone, but the strength of a human who refused to be ordinary, standing beside a queen who refused to bow to fear. Together they would shape the Dominion for generations to come, a legend that would be told wherever humans and aliens met among the stars. And Daniel Ward, once an ordinary mechanic from Earth, had become something far greater, a hero, a partner, and a symbol of humanity's unyielding spirit.